This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Flava Naturals. See for yourself what a super burst of flavanols can do for your brain and physical health. Go to flavanaturals.com and use the offer code BOB for 20% off your first order. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/beancast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 492, Olympus Has Fallen. For Monday, April 16th, 2018. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. Cooperation between agency partners is the dream of every brand manager. However, making it happen is easier said than done. Still, P&G has a plan they think will form more productive cross-agency cooperation. Can it work? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, how innovating retail may mean ending it, deciding when you've overcorrected for brand safety, whether reverse upfronts should be a thing, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with a super advisor at the Innovation Scout, author, speaker, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Hey, Joe.
Hello, Bob. I like to be referred to as super, even though I created that title for myself. It still sounds good.
I'm sure we'll learn more about the Innovation Scout somewhere, probably at the shameless plugs at the end of the show, but congratulations on that move. Also joining us, we have the President and Chief Creative Officer of Allscope, Mashburn Enterprises company, Mr. Jonathan Sackett. Hey, Jonathan.
Bob, Joel, how you guys doing?
Esoteric question. I'm not really sure how to answer that.
Just say you're doing fine. That's fine.
I guess I am doing fine. Well, I want to jump right into the topics because we've got a big one that came up late in the week. P&G is continuing its strong-arm efforts to force agencies into what it deems to be more productive working relationships. So instead of bringing in competing shops on test projects against their incumbent partners, they're instead seeking to augment the existing partner with team members from other agencies to work together on projects. Now, this is obviously a new paradigm. We've often seen agencies thrown together having to work together in various capacities, but rarely have we seen it so that they're forced to work together on the same team with a single leadership from the partner agency. So, Jonathan, the frenemies model is something we all are used to in the ad world. Does this solution solve the cooperation problem or simply exacerbate the situation? What's your take on P&G's move, and is it palatable for the industry to take advantage of?
Yeah, I think. Okay, man, this is what a loaded question. I got so many thoughts on this one. Okay, so anybody who knows my background, I was a head of North America for Ogilvy. Okay,
right.
And before that, I was the head of the Chicago office for DDB. Now, here's the deal. I don't care what anybody says, and I don't know if it's a product or a symptom of the people that get into advertising, but people that are in advertising, generally speaking, do not work well together. Now, when we're selling network solutions, right, be it Ogilvy or any of these other big guns, even the people in different offices of the same company do not work well together historically. That's just the way it goes. So, I think what they're doing by trying to force integration, it may work, it may not, but I think there's a bigger problem out there, which is going to be staffing, because how do you get your people paid? How does the staffing plan work? Because that's what advertising agencies do. They're there basically to sell you a staffing plan so you get the smartest people on it. They're forcing something that is going to be difficult to get to work, because you guys know as well as I do, competing offices don't work well together, let alone a network of the same offices working well together. It's going to be a tough sell.
But they're not trying to force one company together with another company. They're actually cherry picking talent from one agency partner and saying, hey, you guys go be part of this agency for this project and work on it. In a lot of ways, it's kind of genius in that it makes you have this Stockholm syndrome type effect where you kind of go
Stockholm syndrome.
you've been abducted by this other agency and you slowly get absorbed into their culture and you get the benefit of both agencies working, and both agencies are being paid and they're not in a competitive competitive situation where they're trying to undercut each other constantly with each other's ideas.
No, you're right. Go ahead, Joe, please.
No, I was going to say, kind of the only genius could be evil genius, and I mean there's and the word sadistic comes to mind. This is in part one of those cases where the big brand bullies, in this case P&G, because they're the buyer and because they have the money, what they say goes. And pretty much all the way even at a holding company level, these guys are powerless to be able to resist and be able to kind of draw a line in the sand. The one thing I wanted to add before we kind of leave the first part behind is, I think Jonathan was being too kind. He was talking about companies within the same holding company playing nicely together. Even within one company, within one holding company, you don't even have departments playing nicely together. I mean, this is the advertising business where for the longest time, the creatives have always been able to bully around the suits and the different departments in terms of, great ideas or big ideas can come from anyone as long as it's the creative director. So you've got this kind of history of this paranoia, this neurosis, this inability to collaborate and cooperate. And so the genius part of it, to your point, is in a way is forcing these very small, narrow-minded people or departments or even a psyche to be able to have to open themselves up and collaborate in uncomfortable situations. And let's be honest, that's the way the world is working today. If you're a brand, you're doing backflips in the shower when you can get ideas through a variety of influencer and micro influencer and advocates and crowdsourcing. So why the hell do you even need to go inside one agency or even holding company when pretty much the entire world is at your disposal?
Well, Joe, that's a good point. I think you're absolutely right about infighting. Absolutely. But if you guys don't mind, I want to tell you a quick scenario, and I won't mention any agency names like Horizon. But back in my Martin days, yeah, I'm going on the attack now. Get ready. Back when I was at the Martin agency and we did all the Geico stuff, the media agency for Geico was Horizon Media. So what happened was, when I first got to Martin, I called Horizon, to the powers that be there, and they wouldn't return my calls. And I said, well, here's what I'm finding out is happening, that they're doing a media buy in isolation of creative, and they're throwing it over the fence to us. Okay, we need 500 banners, 300 television commercials, whatever. And I was like, well, wait a minute, there's a better way to do this. And they wouldn't even return my call. And then finally, the assistant to whoever there called my assistant and said, well, ask Sackett what he wants. I'm like, what do I want? I want a better product.
But what you're describing is a much bigger problem. That's not about cooperation between agencies as much as it is an endemic problem across the relationship between media agencies and creative partners. I mean,
that's very true. But
this is an industry-wide problem. This is not
absolutely. And I just think that these guys are. I think what these guys are going to do by trying to force that collaboration. Hey, if it works, great, and a better product comes out of it, that's wonderful. But I'm telling you, it's just going to be an uphill battle.
Something that I really want to pay attention to, though, is what the advantage that P&G can get out of it. And by extension what other brands could get out of a situation like this that is beneficial to them. And the first thing that came to my mind is that you want to have as many creative minds working on your problem as possible, but at the same point, you want to make sure that you maintain continuity and consistency across all your efforts. So I don't see it. I don't see necessarily a downside of putting, say, a digital team from another agency in the same group as the general advertising team that's going to town on the general ad campaign. And it's just like, and to bring those two teams together to work hip by hip. Well, I don't even know what the expression is. I'm like mixing metaphors, but you know what I'm saying? To have these two different teams with two different disciplines working together on the same team with the same boss, not being answering to a whole nother set of hierarchical operational concerns. I mean, it makes a lot of sense on paper.
It does on paper. But again, did you guys ever see the movie Miracle?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember Kurt Russell where he's giving the speech of why dream teams don't work?
I don't remember that speech, but it's been a long time. But I know what you're talking about. For the sake of the listeners, Miracle is the story of the Miracle on Ice, the 1984 hockey team that brought the U.S. hockey team that brought home the gold against the Russians, who were a dominant force. So that gives you a little context. Go ahead, Jonathan.
There you go. No. Thank you for saying that. I think because what he says in his infamous speech is he says, look, the reason why dream teams don't work is it's relying solely on the ability of the individual and not the teamwork. And I think, you can getting the best people in the room doesn't make a dream team. Getting the right people in the room does. So this is going to come down to the individual and their willingness to work with partner agencies more than anything.
There's no doubt that there is a tremendous amount of validity in that statement, and we had this move in the business over the last couple of years, maybe a little bit more than that, the last 3 or 4 years, where entire new agencies were being formed. I think there's one called, is it Red Sky or Red Bull? No, it's not Red Bull. It's Red Sky or something, which is a WPP conglomeration of various people from different agencies to form a new company, and that seemed to kind of be all the rage for a while, which is clients saying, but I want to be able to cherry pick my dream team. But to your point, Jonathan, kind of dream teams, I mean, we look at one of the most classic examples is in baseball, right? You've got Moneyball on the one side, you've got the New York Yankees on the other side. And just having a bunch of rock stars or all stars doesn't necessarily work. I think, fundamentally what makes me concerned about this is that, you would like to believe in one agency that they have best-in-class talent across a variety of breadth and depth across the entire communications continuum. But I think that that's unrealistic. I would have to believe, though, that a client should be able to find all of that talent within a friggin' holding company. And the fact that they've got to go outside of that entire 8,000-pound gorilla to find individuals or mercenaries or boutiques or subject matter experts is extremely troubling. Now, that said, as one of those boutiques or thought leaders or subject matter experts, I encourage that model completely, because ordinarily those people wouldn't have a look in. They wouldn't have an opportunity to be, antagonizing or provoking or disrupting around the table. And so that part of it is intriguing. The other part is, I mean, this business is so antiquated and so broken. Compensation, for example, is so in need of a complete makeover. That anything's got to be better than let's be honest. I mean, Jonathan, I'm sure you can talk to. There are only two models, right? There's the one throat to choke, and then there's the peacock approach. In terms of, but what's happened with both of those is they've both failed, because the one throat to choke just doesn't work because you end up with a jack of all trades and master of none, and the peacock approach doesn't work either because you end up with 17. I mean, I remember being on the BeanCast, if not the last time, 2 BeanCasts ago. Remember, Bob, where we were talking about a voice AOR. I mean, when you need a voice AOR and an IoT AOR and a big data, I mean, it becomes, there just isn't enough talent inside the client organization or hours in the day to manage all of these, agencies. Each one wants to slit the throat of the others in the room.
Yes.
Here's my thought. Is there a practical logic behind all this that we're just not seeing, that's not immediately obvious? Because does P&G really care whether their agencies work together better? Are they really feeling underserved by the talent they're getting from the partner agency? Or is this more about trying to put the partner agency on notice that you're not invincible, that we're going to hold your feet to the fire, and if we're seeing ideas that are better coming from other agencies, we're going to use them at your expense? I mean, could this possibly be more of a strong arm tactic than we're giving it credit for?
Well, yeah, that's a great point, Bob, because I think some of these companies feel that if they put the fire to the feet of their agencies, they're going to do better work because they're threatened or they're going to lose their business. Now, if you look at back when we were doing all the Bud Light work, when I was at DDB, what's the name of the company that bought out Budweiser?
AB InBev.
There you go. Thank you.
Well, I mean, InBev bought them, and now they became
InBev,
AB
yeah.
InBev.
That's right.
You'd think I would know this since I worked with them, but anyway. So what they did was they took it to the limit as far as every single project was going to be a creative shootout. Okay, so I made the decision to just back out, period, because we couldn't staff around that. I'm not going to go in and pitch for every single initiative that Budweiser and its subsequent brands have. And it's just bad. It was bad for agency business is what it was. And I think that, to your point, I think what these guys are doing is it's a little bit of a scare tactic, like, hey, perform or get out. And it doesn't keep for consistency, it doesn't keep for legacy, and it doesn't keep for good business for the agencies at all. So you know what? If it does work out, man, God bless them. But I got to tell you, it's going to be an uphill battle because of the temperament of people that work in advertising. It's going to be an uphill battle.
Joe, any fear of this becoming a trend that infects other brands? I mean, if P&G experiences any kind of success, or at least says that they have some success using this tactic,
they're going to say that.
Yeah, because whether it works or not, they're going to say that it was successful, at least one of these test projects that they're doing. And it's going to infect the rest of the industry. It's just, I'm wondering, how much are you worried that this is going to be something that every big brand who has the deep pockets and can afford to bring in multiple partners on every project, how much they're going to embrace this and use this going forward?
Well, look, I mean, I think, and I was reading one of the source articles, Mark Pritchard and the CMO, or I don't even think that's his title. I think it's Chief Brand Officer of P&G, and before that, Jim Stengel. They were really great at being figureheads, not just for P&G or even for CPG, but for the entire industry. And their role was almost to be a provocateur, and kind of using the whole adage of the rising tide floats all boats. And I think to a degree there is an element of PR associated with this move, this challenge.
Oh yeah, hell yeah! This is
we're
so much
about
PR,
now,
right?
Right. Well, and to the point of just making a couple of the larger players a little bit unsettled and a little bit nervous. Mission accomplished, because whenever there is the threat of even one individual coming in, behind that individual is typically a network or typically a bunch of strategic partners. So I think that point, I mean, I think it's a fairly obvious point. Again, my concern in terms of this becoming the norm is just that it speaks to a fundamental problem in the business, that they can't find the talent in-house or in the existing structure. But I will say, I think the P&G calls this term fixed and flow, or at least part of the element is fixed and flow. And really what they're advocating is this idea that there should be some staples, some, carved in stone agency partners or even functions. And you would think client service would be that. Ultimately, from a relationship standpoint, at the very highest level, that one agency still has to be the orchestrator or the conductor or the integrator, whatever you want to call them. I even wrote about some of these ideas in my very first book, in Life After the 30-Second Spot. I spoke about a new agency model, that there would be agencies called integrators that they would do nothing else but just bring everyone together and coordinate and be that conductor, so to speak, in a sense. And so, I would think client service would be that. But when it comes to ideas and creativity, I think we all have always believed, and we should, that creativity must be democratized and cannot be monopolized and cannot be hoarded by one person, by one department, by one agency, or by even one holding company. And so I think if they can figure out this fixed and flow approach, it could very well become the norm. But I mean, I don't know what this will do to the holding companies.
Well, you know what, Joe, that's a good point, and I'm sure we're gonna have to move on here. But the one thing, listen, you're dead on with the responsibility, and the buck has to stop somewhere, right? I would say, I've always said, I'm tangenting a little bit, but I've always said that creative shouldn't be a department; it should be a discipline, and I think that. I've worked for all these big agencies. I will tell you right now that the account management, the account services, or whatever you want to call it, department has been neutered by the creative departments. So that's the problem, is that I think account people are historically notorious for just being, for lack of a better word, for being the bitch to the creative. So, that it's gonna come down to individuals and getting the right people involved.
Yeah, all I know.
I'd like to also bring up that I said neutered.
All I know is I don't want to be the guy who's embedded into the other team, because it's just like, that's going to be like putting a target on your back every single step of the way. It's going to be.
You know what? I guarantee you, the frustration level is going to be 11, and you're going to just watch the turnover that happens in something like that.
Yeah, well. We're going to move on, and we're going to talk next about innovating retail and how some people are saying that possibly the solution to innovating retail is to end retail. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about chocolate. Not just any chocolate. I want to talk about our sponsor, Flavonaturals, because here, let me just tell you about flavanols, because the flavanol antioxidants in dark chocolate are great for you. And no one does chocolate better than our sponsor, Flavonaturals. Look, here are the simple facts, and you got to pay attention to this. Science supports that the flavanols in dark chocolate benefit brain function, they benefit heart health, they benefit exercise performance. Look, I count myself as living proof in all three of these cases. I've been eating their product, I've been taking it, I've been putting it in my coffee, and it's absolutely amazing how it's improved my brain function, improved my heart health, and improve my exercise performance. But the trouble is, to get enough flavanols from your average dark chocolate to actually see these kind of benefits, you'd likely have to eat 5 bars or more, which is not going to be any good for your waistline in the end. Which is why I am so excited to tell you about the Flavonaturals system. One Flavonaturals bar made from ultra premium cocoa beans crams in the flavanol benefits of 5, count them 5 typical dark chocolate bars at 1/5 the calories. And their sugar-free mix has the benefits of 9, count them 9 typical dark chocolate bars with even fewer calories. You put it all together, and I'm feeling like a super strong brainiac these days. They ship me a whole bunch of the product. I am absolutely loving it. Whitney's loving it. We are eating the bars like they're going out of style. Probably a few too many bars sometimes. And some of the best tasting chocolate bars I've ever had. Not even exaggerating a little bit. These things are absolutely delicious. And I took their 10-day challenge with their mix by simply adding it into my morning cup of coffee, and I could immediately start feeling the benefits. Which brings me to the big opportunity for you. Now, I want you to consider buying some chocolate and giving it a shot. But not just for yourself. Forget about yourself. If this can improve the functioning of your entire office, why not buy some for your entire office? If you're in charge of it, if you got the ear of the office manager, get them on the horn. Tell them to buy some of this chocolate because it's amazingly powerful. It's got all the flavanol benefits, and I can get you 20% off. Just go to FLAVANaturals.com. That's flavanaturals.com. Order the 10-day challenge packet, get some bars to try, buy some for the entire office, and at checkout, you use the offer code BOB, that's B-O-B, for a 20% discount off the entire order. Now, this is great. You got to go and do this right away before the offer ends on July 31st. So go to flavanaturals.com, use the offer code BOB, and get your 20% off today. If chocolate is your weakness, let Flava Naturals be your strength, and we thank them very much for their support of our show. So how do you like that? Chocolate. I'm actually selling chocolate on the show, and it's incredible.
I was gonna say, Bob, I'm on their site right now, and I love that. I love that line. Chocolate was your weakness, now it's your strength. That's pretty cool. Tell them to call me. I want to work with these guys.
Well, Beth is amazing. She came up with the line and has been doing some great work over there. So kudos to her.
I think because it's just you and me, Jonathan, so we may as well give them some free consulting tonight and brainstorm a bit. But I think they got to get themselves written into Silicon Valley, because I can just see that plot line: a little bit too much chocolate, but a whole lot of productivity.
hey, Joe, let me do the creative, okay? Brilliant.
Oh, wait a second. I thought creativity could come from anyone.
You know what? The best creative does come from anywhere. You're absolutely right.
Well, moving on with our next topic, we often talk about how Amazon is innovating retail. I mean, I can't count the number of times we've talked about Amazon on this show and how they've been innovating the ways that they sell products to the public. But are they really on a mission to improve retail, or are they simply trying to provide better platforms for direct brand selling? It's an interesting premise. Joe, retail is on the ropes, and brands are at the mercy of this disrupted channel. They're looking for ways to go more direct to the consumer. You talk about it. I've heard you talk about it. Can you envision a future without any retailers or middlemen? Is that a possible scenario that we could end up with?
I mean, not only is it possible, it's probable, in the sense that retail as we know it or knew it will disappear and will cease to be. And but something else will come out of it. I've spent a considerable amount of time of all the different verticals and industries through my 6 years with Evolution, in particular on the whole CPG and the retail space. And I think I saw a stat that 18,000 retail outlets will close down in 2018. And it's just boggling. It's mind-boggling. And part of the reason is there is no business model that makes sense anymore for retail in terms of the actual, even just from a real estate standpoint, from an inventory standpoint, when you look at a Barnes and Noble, when you look at one of the, I mean, even Walmart is experimenting with alternate delivery and alternate distribution and these big massive warehouses. The only real estate that makes sense is a warehousing, logistics and distribution and fulfillment center, which is really what Amazon is in many respects. Amazon would not say that they're innovating retail. They would refer, and they would never refer to themselves as an e-commerce or an e-tailer or bookseller. They refer to themselves as a fulfillment company or a distribution company or company.
Yeah, Joe, to that point, they would say it's a platform, right? And I think you're absolutely right. But let me just ask you a question here, if you don't mind. Don't you guys agree, though, that I don't know if it's generational or what, but don't you agree that there's still an element of the touchy-feely that retail provides that people are going to want? I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well,
Um,
there's the
not,
possibility that that's true, but from that standpoint, there are a lot of brands out there who have retail operations that are completely about connecting the brand itself to the public.
right, like
So it's
Tesla, right?
right, right.
Tesla's the consummate
But I
example.
mean, thinking about clothing, I mean, there's designer boutiques, there's dress shops, there's Old Navy, there's Gap. It's just like these retailers are putting together brick and mortar situations that connect them directly to the consumer. Where retail is the most in trouble is in this aggregation model, where one retailer aggregates all this different product lines together under one roof and tries to sell it to the
Yeah,
consumer.
and that anchor tenant, kind of process or platform, even if you maybe I don't want to confuse the terms platform, but that scenario is the cornerstone of the mall. So without those aggregators, the entire mall disappears.
Right.
And
So what it
and
comes down to is retail can exist, but it needs to exist in a much more scaled back fashion, because the old model was that we'd have one big aggregator and they would be, as you said, Joe, the anchor tenant at the end of the mall. And they would keep everybody else afloat because people would be drawn to the J.C. Penney's of the world, and then they'd end up at the, whatever, the like dress
lids.
shop or whatever.
Let's go with
BB.
lids.
Yeah, lit. But I mean, that model is broken, and it's just like for retail to survive, it needs to survive in a much more scaled back fashion where you have returns to urban centers, where these small boutique shops can continue to promote the brand identity and give that touchy-feely experience for those who want it. But I think that fewer and fewer people want to have that experience now. Fewer and fewer people are
I want to
seeking
go
it.
back. I mean, Jonathan asked me about the touchy-feely part, and
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little uncomfortable, quite frankly, with you mentioning about
Hey, I
touchy-feely.
can't help it. It's that accent of yours, Joe.
Yeah, we were wondering who would be the first person to mention what's been going on with WPP. So I guess it's me. Or maybe it was you.
Hey,
Maybe
you down with
Oh.
WPP? Yeah, you know me.
but but the answer is, I mean, the answer is not really, because just look at these companies like Allbirds that out of nowhere have burst on, and Untuckit, that have burst onto the scene, selling direct to customer with these and of course Zappos, with these incredible return policies, and really just creating this environment where you don't have to touch and try on and and experience apparel. Apparel was always thought of as the last bastion, the one thing that would that you would always need the bricks and mortar model. And I think we've seen now that you don't. So for me, do I think retail will go away completely? Well, I said it earlier, and I alluded to the fact that I think it's going to look very different. I've always cautioned marketers, and I've said to them, just remember one thing: no matter what happens, until we until we create that pill that allows you to stay awake for 24 hours, or until we create some kind of sci-fi type of product, there's still 24 hours in the day. We still have two eyes, we still have one nose, we still have two ears, we still have one stomach, we still have a very, very limited and challenged attention span. And the older we are, the less the ability we have to multitask. And certainly younger consumers have the ability to be able to do more. But we have to, food, for example, I do not foresee a virtual model or a all digital model or a mobile model anytime soon where we will actually consume our food any other way than physically. But to be able to fall back on that as a almost safety blanket or security blanket is a fool's errand too, because 3D printing, for example, where food can be printed, or just the fact you look at a model like Uber Eats, how that has kind of been able to disrupt as well a certain business model or certain distribution. And so,
Well, Joe, let me ask you this: do you think Do you think because I look at this as hand in glove, okay? We were in my past, we were agency of record for Walmart, right? And it was amazing to me that the director of marketing could not get the data from the website activity because the web guys for Walmart would hold it hostage, okay? So the question is, do you think this is a problem of not understanding the evolution of business, or is it a problem of people not knowing that there's an inherent difference between web activity and in-store experience? Because it's a different way to look at it, to say, well, they're just not on top of the internet. Because frankly, if I go into the Gap today, but then I end up buying something from the Gap at Amazon, does the store get credit for that sale? No, they don't even know that I was in there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, connecting the online world and the offline world is a problem for a lot of retailers, but I don't think that it's as I don't think that people are as unaware of the problem as they once were. I mean, you bring up the Walmart example. That's what, like 15 years ago at this point. And, it's just like Walmart is well ahead of the game in terms of, integrating their data platforms and trying to create a more unified consumer experience.
But that's not, no, that's 5 years ago.
Okay, I'm doing the math. I'm thinking you were with Walmart a lot longer ago, but that's beside the point. I mean, I think that in this time, we've got a situation where consumers are, where brands are starting to figure out what they need. It's just that they have to do a complete digital transformation, which is like
That's right.
steering the Titanic. It's not that they're unaware of the problem. I think they're very painfully aware of it. And I think that the vendors out there that are providing the solutions are doing an excellent job of communicating the need and the solutions that are necessary. It's just that changing the entire operational structure and risking everything that you have on a new structure that you're trying to put in place, that's a scary proposition for most of these companies, and they're trying to take the baby steps.
Sort of is, but I would say and if you guys know of a case study, I do not. But how come I'm not seeing somebody running a beacon technology, which is proximity based technology, right? Running that and marrying that up with the Amazon experience so that they know that I came in the store, I shopped, I didn't buy, got home, got online and bought. I don't see that type of footprinting anywhere. If anybody's doing it, then so hopefully one of the listeners will correct me on that. And usually your listeners correct me on just about everything. But I think, and I listen, I love it. I love the feedback. I just think if you marry up a beacon technology with the on-phone experience, with the online experience, I just don't see a lot of that happening.
Well, I would just, I'll give you not a case study per se, but an example with Walmart. They've been experimenting with, and I don't know if the correct, it's a kiosk, or I think it's referred to almost as a Walmart tower, and they were prototyping this in Oklahoma City, and essentially it's a big cube. It almost does look like the Borg type of cube in a sense. But what you do is you basically do your full shop online, and then basically drive up to this. It's almost kind of the equivalent of drive-through. Drive up to this kiosk, scan or enter your customer number, and this big door opens or window opens, and all of your shopping basically gets delivered to you in these bins, which you then put into your trunk. And so, I think it's important for us to kind of recognize retail itself, of course, exists and will exist, but the way it looks is gonna be very, very different. And
what you just described, though, is what you just described.
Somebody has to identify what the role of the store is going to be in a consumer's purchasing decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's at the heart of the problem, Joe. I mean, Jonathan. I mean, I think that we need to re-envision where retail fits into the mix and how important it is. because the brands are looking for ways that they can connect to the consumer because they need
That's
the
right.
data. It's not for any other reason except that they don't know who their customers are. The retailer has controlled who their customer is. And until retail figures out a way to deliver back to the brands the data that they need to
That's right.
effectively market to their consumers and to effectively create relationships with their consumers, they're never going to be able to stem the flow of blood because the brands are going to be always
Wow.
they're always going to be competing against their own retail partners from this stage forward.
You're absolutely right. And I think I don't want to speak for Bob and Joe, but I think what you guys are both saying is that I'm brilliant. So I'll just leave it at that.
I think I would go. I would say that.
I mean, you are brilliant, but I don't think that. I think what both of you were saying was that I was brilliant. I mean, that's what I heard.
Hey,
what I want to know is
British accent. You're smarter than everybody.
What I want to know is this is my show and nobody calls me brilliant, and I'm really upset about that.
Wait until the shameless plugs and we both heap effusive praise on you.
Yeah, Bob.
But you know what? I think it's important to bring this back down to from the sublime, is that, if you take a customer-centric lens to this topic, and everything should always have that customer-centric lens. I mean, it takes me back to my agency days, when with all the dot-com boom and bust and all of the distraction and the hype, if you just followed the consumer and you just saw every single day more people getting online, getting more comfortable online, faster speeds, the whole move from dial-up to broadband, and comfort at the time in terms of giving out their credit card and transacting online. If you just follow the consumer, you can never ever be led astray. And I think one of the most fundamental truths is we do love to shop. We do love to spend money that we don't have. We do love to buy things we don't need. And there is, to Jonathan's point, I think it's not that it isn't about the touchy-feely, but it is about the experiential component as opposed to a pure transactional and consumption-driven component.
Yeah, there you go.
And so I think the thing is, if that is true, then we do have to slay the sacred cow that it has to take place in a bricks and mortar environment. That doesn't mean the bricks and mortar environment can't be all digital and all virtual. And it doesn't mean that it can't take place in environments other than bricks and mortar. And if you take that approach, I think we will see, or we could see, retail being reborn.
Well, we got to move on to the last two topics real quickly. First up, brand safety issues in online advertising has led to some pretty drastic mandates from advertisers. People are blocking entire sites. They're blocking entire networks. But some are now questioning whether brands may have gone too far with these efforts. Jonathan, in an effort to keep their brands safe from questionable content, are advertisers shutting off important pipelines of opportunity by blocking these sites that are potentially holding, fruitful, profitable customers?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Let's move on to the next topic.
No, I don't know if you guys saw this. I posted a little article that I wrote on LinkedIn, and it was about the Facebook debacle, right?
Right.
And it's confusing to me, and I'm really interested in your guys' take on this because, okay, so I mapped it out. That Zuckerberg, what did he sold his 30% shares for 1.13 billion or whatever the number was, right? You guys with me on this?
Yeah.
So why was this a surprise to people that's the business model? That's how this works. This privacy thing is going over the top. People, you guys, I remember, I think it was in 2011. When did Gmail launch?
Oh, God, I have no idea. A lot earlier than 2011, I'll tell you that much.
Well, I was quoted about it. Some reporter had called me and they said, "Hey, Google is launching Gmail and we want your take on it." And I said, "Well, they have said they're going to read your email for better ad serving and better ad targeting." And they said, "Do you think that will prohibit people from signing up?" And I was quoted as saying, I bet you Gmail will be the biggest email provider on earth. And because people don't care until it's too late. So I think brands and people, it's the same problem. What happens is, everything is about privacy, but you guys, if I just posted a video online 2 days ago, I think I tweeted it. Follow Jonathan Sackett, by the way. But this guy that Google uses your microphone on your computer. So if you have a conversation about something, even that gets served in ads. So if you get a chance, take a look at that video that I posted on Google. They're doing that too. So are they missing out on an opportunity? Yes. Are they missing out because they're not sniffing enough data out there? Yes. That's how the business model of Facebook works.
Yeah,
And
but
I
I don't think this is. I don't think that's. I mean, all that is important for us to realize as brands what the opportunities are, and for as consumers to understand what brands are taking from us in terms of our data and understanding us. But I mean, I think what the heart of this problem is that brands, in their effort to be safer, have shut off entire websites that they deem to be.
And you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's I can understand not wanting to be next to an ISIS video, but by taking yourself off of YouTube completely, which a lot of brands did in the early days with a drastic sweep of we're not going to do YouTube right now, what they're essentially doing is saying that the site is the problem when it's not the site that's the problem. It's the brand itself and the policing mechanisms that are in place to make sure that the ads are running where content is acceptable. It's just lazy marketing.
No. Yes, that's it. Well, it also can get you short-term PR for a long-term non-solution. Okay? So
exactly.
Anybody who walks away from those properties had better come back pretty soon, because the road is going a certain way. You got to follow it. I mean, you can't just walk away from an avenue or something. Now, again, there's content and context. Like in some of the speeches that I give, I show a contextual media buy where it was for Lunchables, and the banner ad was married up to a school shooting.
Right.
Because
right.
That you've seen this before. So you cannot cut off your nose to spite your face, and those platforms are there for a reason. It's about responsible use of that platform. That's what it's about.
Look, I would probably draw a parallel right now when we think about brand safety, mapping it on one hand to the programmatic and the automation of media planning, buying, and ultimately serving, and then on the other hand, the GDPR conversation and reality. And the fact is, in both cases, when a brand is a tenant renting media as opposed to a landlord owning and monetizing assets, then you're always going to be subject and hostage to the landlord, who might be a slumlord.
Right.
And in many cases, that is kind of, on one hand, the Facebooks of the world, but on the other hand, the reality of this vicious cycle that has been created, where we are trying to, by any means, by hook or by crook, get the scale and the reach and the numbers that we need, and we're paying a bit of a price. But I think my point is, on one hand, let's go all the way back to Bill Bernbach, who said, safe advertising is the riskiest advertising of all. How ironic now that we're talking about brand safety. We should never, brands should never play it safe, and brands should never be safe, because by being safe and being vanilla, and shying away from anything that deviates from the middle of the road, by just sticking to that kind of one size fits all, we're gonna get forgotten and swallowed and just ignored.
Joe, that's a really good point. In this day and age of scream, sometimes you win with a whisper. And you can't vanilla yourself down right now is ridiculous. You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more.
That's a beautiful quote, by the way.
I just made that up.
Huh? Did you really? It was fantastic.
I'm sorry.
Really? Shit. All right.
Look, I'm sorry. I wish we could talk more about that topic because I obviously have a lot more to say on that. I think that the brands are making huge mistakes just by not being strong enough to make a stand in terms of
Yes.
what their brand stands for and to police it appropriately and depending entirely on technology to run their brand. So that's a big problem. But we got to move on to the last topic before we wrap up the show. Can reversed upfronts actually become a thing? Initiative held its second annual reverse upfront, inviting media companies to come hear pitches about their brand clients' needs. Obviously, there's a lot of PR value for them in doing something like this, but Joe, is there a nugget of valuable wisdom in making the upfront about the customer, in this case, the advertisers themselves? Is there something here that other media companies should really pay attention to, or is this purely a PR move on Initiative's part?
I mean, I have to tell you, nobody loves to bash the agencies and the advertising model as much as me. Actually, I'm sorry, as much as Jonathan, and
Yeah, I was
then
gonna say.
myself, and then myself. But in this case, I love the idea. I mean, I love the idea of actually. I mean, these companies, these media companies, are desperate to be treated as partners and equals, or at least earn the right to be anything but a vendor and have to respond to an RFP and be kind of forced down this this continuum like cattle. And so if this isn't just a PR, I mean, of course, it could be, but in the case of whether it's Initiative or any other company, inviting in some of these media partners to actually demonstrate their ability and their capability and understand the client's business. I mean, this actually fits together so interestingly with this whole first topic of interagency cooperation, because when we talk about interagency cooperation, why just talk about agencies and consultancies in and around holding companies? Why not bring the media companies into play? And I can tell you, I just completed a project for a client where focused on content strategy and content marketing, and I went out and interviewed a whole bunch of key players, both executives within this brand, also representatives of all their agencies, but also representatives from some of the media companies. And we're talking about some of the largest, most established media companies in the world, some of the specialist subject matter experts, some of the new kids on the block, if you will, and also some of the large digital shops that have done a tremendous amount of investment. And you can probably work out who they are. The one thing that I heard, the one thing that was a common thread from all of these companies, was the media companies almost begging, pleading, and not just from a sales standpoint, but actually saying, just treat us like, just treat us like humans, bring us into this process and allow us the opportunity to demonstrate what we can do for you. And so I don't even think reverse upfront it's reverse engineering, if anything, but the concept of the upfront is so broken. Everything about the upfront is broken. Buying media in advance for of a year when we don't even know what the hell's going to happen tomorrow, the next day, the next week. I mean, major news breaking this weekend that just turns everything on its head. So anything that puts the customer first, anything that allows media companies or any potential partners to truly understand the business, as opposed to spots and dots and filling data points on a spreadsheet, how can that be a bad thing?
Well, you know what, Joe? This goes back to our earlier conversation of agencies and models and broken models and such. And what the historic notion is to be keepers of the knowledge, so nobody can steal your work, your client, your thunder, whatever, right? So I love the idea of this, because if transparency should be king, but it isn't. And frankly, it's always the media agencies will say, no, we've got this. Don't worry, we've got it covered. Versus the clients getting involved directly with the property, right? So Fox Sports or whomever. And so I think that transparency is going to rule the day, and it should rule the day because it's the right way to go, in my opinion.
What I like about this idea more than anything is that, first of all, I agree with you, Joe. It shouldn't be called a reverse upfront because that's not what it is. What it is making all the media companies come to them and hear what the brand's initiatives are going to be, what their intentions are, to find out what is necessary for them in order to make sure that their message gets out, and to essentially put all the media companies on notice. We're looking for custom-made solutions for our brands. We're not there to just buy media in bulk. And I think
that's right.
I
Tell
think
us what we don't know, right?
Right. I think that's a brilliant strategy because it does make it all about the client, and it makes it all about the specific situations rather than the programs that are being offered by these media companies and these assets offered by these media companies that are out of touch with what the brand actually requires in order to meet its objectives. So I like this. I really do like it. But with that, we got to wrap up the show. It's time for the Ad Fail 5, but before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Joe Jaffe. You can find him at startupsforbrands.com. Actually, that's his old website. Can we still find you at startupsforbrands.com, or is
Yeah, no, you can, and absolutely.
Okay, startupsforbrands.com. And he's got a new gig that he's going to tell you all about right now. So you want to kind of pitch yourself and tell us about what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a nutshell, for 6 years, I co-founded and ran Evolution, looking at creating connections or bridge between startups and brands, but really trying to build the ecosystem for brands and startups collaborating together. And the way we always used to pitch it is, what if Kodak acquired Instagram? What if Blockbuster had invested in Netflix? And I still believe it's one of the, if not the biggest idea right now for large corporations, which is figure out any which way they can how to work with some of these technology companies. What I did realize throughout this process was that we took a very velvet glove, a very manual and curated approach. It was very much about holding hands and spoon feeding. But the world is just moving so quickly, and the turnover was so volatile that anybody that comes and tells you how many startups are in their database are either lying or a fool, because the reality is half of them are probably going to turn over within a year anyway. And so I was introduced to a wonderful woman who founded a company called Innovation Scout. And what Innovation Scout is, I mean, the easiest way to describe them is basically the technology version of Evolution. So they're a SaaS platform that uses big data and machine learning to basically automate and fast track the entire vendor discovery process. So it's important because it's not just about startups or even technology now, but really any company that can help a brand. So they can go into university IP, they can go into inventors and inventions, and it doesn't have to be about technology anymore. And suddenly I just saw this whole world open up where now practically over 1 million different choices or options are available to companies, and the ability to have this automated, streamlined, and accelerated was just, so enticing. And so I joined them as a super advisor, and I'm helping them build their business.
It sounds amazing, and I'm glad that the evolution model and everything that you've done to build that up over the last 6 years is going to continue on in a more technology-focused arena. So that's fantastic.
Right,
really,
the
really
evolution
excited.
of evolution.
Yeah, very excited for you. Now,
Thank
next
you.
up, we have Jonathan Sackett. You can find him at allscope.com. That's where he is the interim president and chief creative officer. Did I get that correct?
I think that's what I am, although I'm thinking of calling myself emperor, but whatever.
That always goes well with the employees. So tell us,
Yeah.
what's going on in your world? What would you like to promote?
Well, first of all, Allscope historically was a media company, and now we're taking it to the next level of doing creative and technology and things like that. They were already successful in media. But if I was going to promote something, I would say please share and follow this show. I think Bob and Joe, you should follow them as well. They're good friends of mine, really smart guys, and I have mad respect for both of them. And I want to tell you, we are about to. This is premature, and I shouldn't be opening my mouth, but you know me, I always will. We are partnering with, probably owning a good percentage of, and marketing two black guys with good credit. So they've got their own podcast. They're ranked as one of the most followed, most listened to. And what they do is they basically talk about fiscal responsibility for professional athletes. So we've got the show on TuneIn is going to launch, have a hard relaunch May 21st. And the guests on the show are Jamal Mashburn and Jonathan Sackett. So really looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to working with these guys. They're great. They're smart. They're funny. A lot of good things are going to come of this.
And it fits right into the brand model of what Mashburn Enterprises is all about, because Jamal is so much about financial stability and educating people about that. So great
Absolutely.
move. Great move on that part. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. You can find out how to advertise on the program even. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And don't forget, we now have a transcription partner. Transcribeme.com is offering transcription services for the BeanCast. So you can go to any show that you're listening to and find the transcription, a link to it. So definitely check that out. And if you want great transcription services, go to transcribeme.com. Transcribeme.com/BeanCast. They've got a special offer set up just for BeanCast listeners, so definitely check it out. Well, anyway, now it's time for the AdFail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, how fortuitous I put this in the brand in the AdFail 5 right on the weekend that the WPP news broke. Brands are even more disillusioned with their agencies after agencies were required to reveal their pay disparity gaps between their CEOs and their median employees. Can you say 500 to 1? And as it's come out, Martin Sorrell is leaving his company, supposedly stepping down voluntarily, but we'll see whether or not that turns out to be the case. Jonathan, you're the one who hates agencies.
Hey, come on now. I'm not that. That would be self-loathing. But I'll tell you something. Listen, I worked for Martin Sorrell. I knew Martin Sorrell. I shouldn't say knew. I know it's not like he's dead. Look, I mean, didn't everybody know this? I mean, the advertising industry, the entry-level employee gets paid next to nothing. It's a tough industry. It's a tough industry to catapult yourself into. I mean, I've had a pretty good career, so I'm not gonna bite the hand that fed me. But on the other hand, there is no need for that degree of disparity, because I know what the entry-level people make, and it is criminal. It is.
You know, one of the interesting things that was once pointed out to me is that the CEO of Disney makes only a fraction of what the CEO of WPP made on an annual basis. And Disney is maybe a little bit bigger than WPP. Just a tiny bit bigger.
As far as brand and enterprise, absolutely. There's a huge disparity. There's no need. And listen, I've been paid well in the industry, man. I mean, I got nothing to complain about, but I think there's no need to start people that low, because frankly, nowadays you can make more money at McDonald's than you do just starting at an agency.
Well, I think the most telling thing about this story was that the agency, the clients were getting upset about this. When they saw these numbers, the clients are wondering, why isn't I can't have my favorite creative on this count? Because it's just like, it seems like all the money is going to the CEO. It doesn't make any sense to them.
Right.
Well, despite Google supposedly abandoning the practice under some fire, it's funny that you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Jonathan, Oath seems to think scanning AOL and Yahoo email messages for our ad targeting is just fine and dandy. Joe, user permissions be damned, right? I mean, it's just like, if you can do it, do it.
Come on, Bob. This only affects 12 people, so it's gonna be okay.
User permissions be damned. I think
Yeah.
we just found a name for the show.
You actually it's users permission be damned, so we're talking about AOL and Yahoo email messages. How many can there be? Nothing to see here.
Now, Facebook absolutely would never allow another Cambridge Analytical fiasco on their site, right? Well, CNBC discovered otherwise right before the hearings that went on this past week, and when they confronted Facebook about CubeU running the same type of effort that Cambridge Analytica had been running, Facebook promptly shut it down, Jonathan, without comment.
Yeah, I was surprised that they didn't have a comment on that. Weird, right? You know what? Let me tell you something. Having dealt with Facebook since its inception, I will tell you, Facebook will do anything for money. And that's what business is about. So I'm not crucifying them for that. Anything for money and regardless of the consequence. And you know what? This will get a blip on the radar of the media, and that's it. And nobody will care, which is sad.
Yeah, but also, in their defense, they did shut it down without comment, but they did do the sad face and then the angry face and a thumbs up like. So that's fine.
Okay, well, then we can forget them.
Now, DJ Khaled will promote just about anything on his social media feeds, except that certain products like Alcohol Joe require stringent controls over who can see a recommendation. Needless to say, there are suddenly no alcohol ads on the man's feeds any longer. It seems like this is something you would have, as a brand manager doing a deal with a celebrity on Instagram, you would pay attention to the fact that most of his audience happens to be teenagers and your product requires a 21 or older significant audience.
Yeah, so what's left that he can hawk or promote now? Just, I guess, Allbirds and Warby Parkers and...
everything. Everything.
DJ Khaled,
DJ
Khaled DJ Khaled will be just fine. It's the marketers, I fear.
Yeah.
And last but not least, in the aftermath of the Humboldt Broncos tragedy, if you don't remember, a junior hockey team that was killed in a bus crash, a Halifax area Tim Hortons manager decided to honor the team by making green and yellow donuts. Except the efforts did not include any charitable component, meaning all the money went into the manager's pocket, Jonathan. Tim Hortons said they apologized for the misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding, yeah. Hey, look, we're just trying to sell our product here. Nothing to see behind the curtain. That was, dude, that was insulting on so many different levels. I can't even tell you, because it's one thing to say, we're doing this to help build a new gym or I don't know, something, but they're in honor of, and it's going to donate to a charity or something. But talk about, I mean, who thought this? Wait, who didn't think this through?
Well, that's the whole thing. It was one lone manager at a Halifax area store.
Oh, man.
He made the decision to do this. The brand is obviously in damage control, and they forced the manager to offer up a donation out of his own pocket, etc. So. And they tried to do what they could, but this is the problem with franchisees taking matters into their own hand.
Hey, man, Jamal, he and I even talked about this one, and he said, because he's one of the world's biggest franchise owners, and he's like, holy God, who the hell made that decision?
Yeah, it's so sad, because even if the intentions were 100% honorable and pure, and this was their, look, for those of you that know me, know that I started my career working for a fast food company in South Africa, and I worked with these franchisees, helped them with their marketing, and I know who they are and where they're coming from, and what their intentions are, and they're not the Machiavellian, short-sighted and ROI obsessed fiends that unfortunately call themselves marketers. They genuinely are attempting attempting to do their best, or at least, again, let's assume that they took the high road. It just demonstrates also how convoluted and twisted the world is today, but also the reality that you can do something that, let's be honest, was clueless. and you can be in the middle of nowhere in this case. Or, hold on, I don't want to say Halifax area is the middle of nowhere. I'm saying you could be anywhere and do something that really was local or even hyper local, and end up becoming this massive local, regional, even global, appearance on the AdFell 5. So it's kind of, it's sad, because it's sad whether it's pathetic if he took the low road. If he took the high road, it's kind of sad. And all the while, I mean, it makes me think of a hat tip to Saul Colt, because I was listening to a BeanCast, a while ago, talking about all these corporate social responsibility. This was with McDonald's and the kind of hashtag droopy boobs. And Saul said something that I think it was Saul that I thought was quite brilliant. He said, instead of creating ads about women, instead of spending over $1 million to turn the McDonald's arches upside down, why not just donate $1.5 million to Planned Parenthood, or a cause that really would benefit women substantially and tangibly? And that's, I think at the end of the day, whether you are a single franchisee in Halifax or you are the CMO of P&G, just use your brain, use your common sense, use your heart, and do the right thing for the right reasons. I mean, surely only good can come from that, or at a very minimum, not appearing on the AdFell 5.
Well, we can always hope for smarter marketers, but that's not the purpose of the AdFell 5. So.
Yeah. And
thank God for crappy marketers, right?
And if that were true, the three of us would not be on tonight.
Very true.
Have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag AdFell5. That's pound AdFell and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again in 2 weeks because I'm going to be at the LA Times Festival of Books doing some live recordings of the I Make a Living podcast. Hope to see some of you out there, and I hope that you'll join us on this show in about 2 weeks. Take care.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.